They called it the cradle of civilization, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and reason. But beneath the marble temples and golden statues, another Athens existed, a hidden world where faith became a business and the bodies of children became currency. History remembers the philosophers, the artists, the visionaries. It forgets the girls who built their world. Corinth, 400 BC. The temple of Aphrodite glows with torchlight. Inside, a 12-year-old stands on a cold stone altar, trembling, barely covered by a torn tunic. Around her, drunk men raise coins, shouting over one another. The priest calls out numbers like a merchant selling livestock. When the bidding ends, the winner steps forward. She tries to run. Guards drag her back. The priest nods. The temple earns its fee. Every night, hundreds of girls were sold this way. Not as sacrifices, but as property. Their suffering funded democracy itself. In a city of 50,000 people, between 5,000 and 8,000 women lived and died in forced prostitution. 1 out of every 6 women enslaved, branded, and worked until their bodies collapsed. The marble of the Parthenon was paid for with their pain. The philosophers spoke of virtue while walking past the screams. The numbers were terrifying in their precision. Athens didn't hide them. It recorded them. Tax ledgers, court speeches, and civic budgets all show the same truth. Sex was industry. The Temple of Aphrodite alone earned more money than Athens' entire naval budget. State records confirm brothel taxes funded almost 10% of public income. Democracy, art, and marble, financed by human suffering. Inside those brothels, young girls worked 16 to 18 hours a day. There were no holidays, no mercy. 6 to 10 men a day, every day, until the body failed. The price of a visit? 2 obols, less than a loaf of bread. For a city that worshipped logic, everything was reduced to numbers. The owner kept 40 drachmas a month. The woman earned 5, barely enough to eat. Writers like Lysias and Demosthenes documented these facts without emotion. The walls were thin, screams traveled from room to room. The smell of sweat, blood, and oil clung to everything. Athens prided itself on order. And this system was efficient. 8,000 women working meant 60,000 transactions a day. 23 million a year, 23 million paid violations in the city that invented virtue. In Athens, the law protected citizens' property, but not their daughters. There was no minimum age, no boundary between childhood and slavery. Court speeches mentioned girls only 10 or 11 years old, sold for 30 drachmas, the price of a few sheep. Some were born into chains, inheriting their mother's fate. Others were war captives, taken from burning villages, shipped across the Aegean, and branded before they learned what the word freedom meant. The branding was ritualized. A bronze rod, heated until white-hot, pressed deep into the flesh of the inner thigh. Held down by grown men, a child screamed as the smell of her own skin filled the air. That mark was permanent. Identification, humiliation, and destruction all at once. It told the world, you belong to someone, forever. The youngest fetched the highest prices. Merchants advertised untouched girls in public markets, their value 15 times higher than grown women. Every breath became a transaction, every heartbeat a calculation. In the city that worshipped reason, cruelty was an equation. And while marble philosophers debated justice in open squares, just streets away, the gods they praised were being fed in flesh and blood. For every new girl there was a ritual, designed not for ceremony, but for breaking the spirit. When a shipment of captives arrived, the initiation began. A young girl, terrified and uncomprehending, was stripped and assaulted before an audience of laughing men. The others were forced to watch. It wasn't chaos, it was process. A system meant to destroy hope before it could grow. The purpose was precise. First, to crush resistance. Second, to establish order. Everyone saw what disobedience looked like. Third, to entertain. Men placed bets on how long a child would fight before collapsing. Even playwrights like Aristophanes joked about it, because the horror had become normal. It was a public event, part of the rhythm of the city. When it ended, she was no longer a person. She was inventory. The premium for a new girl lasted a single night, her body worth 20 or 30 obols for that one evening, then downgraded to standard stock. The machine kept turning. The screams became background noise. In the same city where Socrates questioned morality, a girl's suffering was priced, taxed, and discussed in court documents, not as crime, but as commerce. Those who survived learned the rules fast. Never cry, never speak unless spoken to, smile even when it hurts. Pain made the men laugh, fear made them crueler. Silence became their only defense. The brothels divided women into categories, every label with a price. Foreigners who couldn't speak Greek, those who resisted, those who obeyed too easily, all had their own rates. But the most profitable were the ones chosen for violence. Graffiti on ancient brothel walls show men paid extra to inflict harm. Burns, broken teeth, slashed faces. It wasn't punishment, it was recreation. The city that measured everything in numbers found a way to calculate pain. These women were called punishment stock. Their purpose was to absorb the brutality that would destroy others. Injuries were expected: broken ribs, knife cuts, burns from oil lamps. The math was simple. Fewer customers, higher price per session. The balance stayed profitable. In Athens, the same minds that perfected geometry and logic turned cruelty into an economic model. Violence was not a crime, it was a service. On festival nights it became religion. When Athens celebrated its gods, the cruelty reached its peak. During the great festivals of Dionysus, brothel women were handed over to crowds as sacred offerings. No payment, no limits. 10, sometimes 15 men at a time. Music played, wine spilled, laughter echoed through the courtyards, while screams filled the gaps between drum beats. These weren't hidden crimes, they were rituals, performed in open temple grounds sanctioned by priests. Bets were placed on how long a woman would stay conscious. Some died before the night ended. Their deaths were recorded not as murders, but as festival casualties. Physicians noted the causes with clinical precision: internal bleeding, suffocation, blood loss, death by worship. Temple scrolls spoke of holy union between man and deity. In truth, it was mass torture disguised as faith. Priests poured wine on altars mixed with the victim's blood, calling it sacred purification. The survivors were dragged back to brothels, torn, bleeding, still expected to work by dawn. The dead were dumped in ravines with the trash. No burial, no name, no soul. In Athens, holiness and horror shared the same altar, and the gods stayed silent. Punishment was a daily ritual: a dropped cup, a word spoken too softly, a tear shed at the wrong moment. Any of it could bring violence. Beatings weren't rare, they were routine. Wooden clubs, metal rods, heavy wine cups, whatever was close enough to use. It wasn't correction, it was control. Some women were locked in dark storage rooms for days without food or water. Others tied to posts in the courtyards, left under the burning sun until they fainted or froze at night. Brothel owners called it character adjustment. The ledgers recorded it like business expenses. Those who tried to escape met worse. A runaway wasn't seen as a victim. She was property stealing itself. Captured women were branded again, this time on the forehead. Some were nailed to wooden boards in public squares, left to die over days while crowds passed by. Others were sold to the mines, where death came slower by exhaustion and stone dust. Even the temples offered no safety. Priests accepted bribes to return fugitives to their owners. Freedom had no sanctuary. Every mark on a woman's body told the story of a failed attempt to live. Pregnancy was considered property damage. To prevent it, women were forced to drink toxic herbal brews, pennyroyal, tansy, and other poisons that tore their insides apart. When those failed, abortion was mandatory. Boiling mixtures were poured inside. Sharp instruments were used without medicine or mercy. Many bled to death within hours. Others died of infection days later. The babies that survived were drowned in buckets or left in alleys. A few were sold. Most were thrown away. When a woman's body finally broke, too weak, too sick, too used, she was carried outside the city walls and abandoned. Still breathing, still alive, death by exposure was cheaper than a doctor. Even then, cruelty didn't end. Burial was forbidden. Their bodies were dumped into ravines with refuse and animal bones. No rites, no names, no peace. Archaeologists have found those graves, hundreds of women, all young, their bones marked by burns and fractures. The same city that built the Parthenon erased them from memory. The same philosophers who defined virtue walked past their pain. Athens created democracy for some and slavery for the rest. Civilizations stood on their bones, and history chose silence. If you liked the video, please subscribe the channel to watch more interesting history.